Okay, London Reelers, I got a surprise for you. Here is my brand new Lamborghini. I will now be shooting my interviews in this car. No, I'm just joking. Tai Lopez, I'm not trying to move in on your scene here. This is the weekly series of Ask Me Anything. I am here in the city of London, my old stomping grounds for when I was in banking, and I just saw that car and it really just reminded me of some of the days of conspicuous consumption when I used to be a derivatives trader and then a derivatives broker, and some of my buddies own cars like that. I actually never went and took the plunge myself, and I was never really big into buying cars or buying houses and things like that. I pretty much just wasted most of my money on a bunch of nonsense. But people have been asking me from my last series, when I talked about my days at MIT, what it was like in banking. So I thought I would break it down for you and give you a little bit about my days of banking and days of trading. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of breakdown of what it was like. So as you know, I was an MIT engineer and I studied mechanical engineering, and I really loved it, and I loved learning that discipline. I loved being at the school, but I got a little anxious when I was at Ford Motor Company at a place called the Aerospace Corporation, because I looked around at some of these dudes that were going to be me in about 15 years, and I thought, man, I don't want to be like this guy. I want to be a banker and be around buildings like this, right? And so quickly I discovered that, you know, it's great to train as an engineer, but the job itself, I just saw myself somewhere in middle management, quite honestly working on an emissions device for a Crown Victoria that was going to be made 8 years later. And I was like, you know what? It just didn't feel right for me, and it just didn't feel right. And sometimes you got to trust your gut, and I did trust my gut on this one, very much so. And so I started reading the Wall Street Journal, and I was lucky enough to take classes at the Sloan School of Management at MIT, and so I learned options theory and learned about futures and learned about accounting and a little bit of mergers and acquisitions. But you know, they can't teach you about the things you need to know on Wall Street in college. They can teach you some of the basics, like the building blocks. It's like someone teaching you about video cameras, and then you have to go do your own talk show. Like, that comes from inside, that's trial and error. They say it about film school sometimes. You know, if you want to learn how to make films, you make a film. You don't really go to film school. So on that note, I had my sights for Wall Street. I actually tried to get a summer internship job, but I couldn't get it based on my experience. And I remember I called up an old MIT alumni. Her name is Sarah Sprung, and she was working at Bankers Trust at the time, one of the upcoming shops for derivatives trading, which was kind of new back then. And I called her on the busy trading floor, and she was really gruff and mean, and I said, hi, this is Brian, I'm at MIT, da 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 da. And she said, what's the delta of an at-the-money call? And she said that to me, and I was like, okay, the delta, I just learned about delta. And I was like, 1? And she's like, it's a half. Click, and she hung up on me. And she was right, and that's the way it was on a trading floor. It was really hardcore. It was like, do it fucking now. And you know, it kind of reminds me of what like Anthony Bourdain talks about as being like a chef, but maybe about 10 times harder being on a trading floor, because it's full of testosterone, there's money flowing around, and the biggest, baddest motherfucker on that floor gets paid the most at the end of the year. And it's a subjective bonus system, so whoever can show that he has the biggest balls really will take home the biggest paycheck. And if that means humiliating someone, then to get there, then they will. And so it's constantly about getting in people's face and fucking with them. Anyways, I digress. So Sarah asked me that question. I got it wrong. I didn't get my summer job, and I kept working. And the following year, I interviewed at a bunch of different places, and one of them was Bankers Trust, which again was a kind of an up-and-coming, kind of a scrappy institution. It was nice because it didn't have a pedigree of a JP Morgan or a Goldman Sachs, but they did reward smart fuckers that knew how to make a lot of money, and they went straight for MIT, and they loved us engineers. And it makes sense because, you know, we're good about taking risk. We make things happen. That's what engineers do. The pure scientists, they think about it like the physicists, no offense, but the engineers build stuff that works. And so I think that's kind of why they wanted us on the team. So I interviewed there, and I remember having my interview at Bankers Trust Plaza, which is right across the street from the former World Trade Center before it was blown to bits when I was in New York City in 9/11. I'll talk about that on another video. And I interviewed there on the 33rd floor, and I remember looking over, you could see the Statue of Liberty on one side, you could see the World Trade on the other side, and a guy named Ari, I'll think of his name, asked me a question. He said, Brian, how many gas stations are there in the United States? And I was like, Jesus. And so I had to quickly, stream of consciousness, figure out how many there were based on assumptions I could make about life and blah, 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 the number of people, how many cars, da, da, da. And I gave him an answer and he said, okay, Brian, now tell me another way you would figure that out. And it was just all about how quickly you could think on your feet. And so I went through many, many interviews, and I finally got the job there. I also got a job at Morgan Stanley in their M&A division, where you advise on mergers and acquisitions, and that's more of an investment banker and kind of an analyst role. And I just wanted to trade, man. I just wanted to trade. It just sounded like the coolest, sexiest thing to do. You get on the phone, you get risk, and you just start swinging it around. And the M&A job seemed boring. You had to do like pitch decks and stuff like that. And I chose wisely. So I picked up my stuff in Boston and I drove it all to New York City, and I went to live in the East Village. I got a roommate who was a rock star, former NYU grad, and he used to make fun of me because he had studied finance and now he was in a rock band, and I would get on the NR line and go down 4 stops, I think it was, down to Wall Street, and I'd walk out of the Twin Towers, and I remember I would stare up at the building, kind of like that thing. I would stare up and look up, and I'm like, man, you must look like a little tourist right now. But I didn't give a shit because it was so fucking impressive just to look up at that building, and I'd be like, Jesus, I'm on Wall Street. And so I went in there, and like, it was like trial by fire. Again, the fire hose in my mouth, turned on full blast. And I remember they sat me down on that trading desk, you know, and it was a whole floor with maybe 250 people. There's no desk. I mean, there's no offices on a trading floor. Everyone's like 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter. So you can hear what everyone's saying, and you can hear the foreign exchange guys at one end of the room, or the treasury guys, or the equity guys, or this guy, and you can hear what they're doing. And so you constantly, it's about information flow. And so I sat down, and I was on the derivatives desk, the interest rate derivatives desk, which was the biggest, baddest desk there was. A lot of people ask about the stock market, but if anybody knows about Wall Street, you'll know that it's the fixed income guys, the bond guys. That's where the real stuff happens, because that's where you can swing around tons of risk. That's where you can clip tons of money, lack of information. That's where the big, big boys are, and that's where the big money is made. And so I was an interest rate derivatives trader, which we took the interest rate yield curve of the United States Treasuries and the banking interest rate curves from, say, one night out to 30 years, and then we would fuck with it. We would sell options on it and buy options on it, and you know, sell swaptions and constant maturity treasury options. You could do every fucking thing you wanted with it once you knew the math. And so, you know, we had good models and we had smart guys, and we were just putting trades on and clipping money. And so that was my exposure to banking. And I was full of these big fucking crazy big ball guys in their late 20s making tons of money and just literally getting in their face. I remember I had one colleague of mine who was a few years older than me, and he would just fucking rip people new ones. I remember he would just look guys in the fucking eye and he'd be like, I'm gonna fucking rape you. And he would just say that on the floor. I would just be like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm gonna piss in your fucking skull if you ever fucking pull that shit, blah, blah, blah. So that was just on the regular basis. I was a munchkin, so they would just totally haze me as well. I had one guy that used to slam his phone like next to my hands all the time when I wasn't looking, pretend like he would break my fingers. And like, you're doing all this while you're trying to price up an interest rate swap on a fucking Excel spreadsheet when you're getting live feed future prices in from Chicago, and you got a salesperson yelling at you, and you got fucking some bank in Japan who wants a price on a 4-year fixed floating swap, and you're quoting them like 4.536%. And if you're off by a basis point, you know, which is 1/100th of 1%, then you're taking a bath on the day. And if you're wrong the other way, they don't trade with you. So it's like all downside, and you got to have all your shit together. And so I fucking loved it, man. I used to joke that I had more fun at work than I did at home because it was just so much more exciting and so much more thrilling. And but I got to learn, and then I had brokers that would do my deals, and they would take me out for steak dinners and all that, and the traders would abuse the brokers, and they taught me how to abuse the brokers, and then later I became a broker. So it was like total full circle. Really kind of funny in that sense. So I hope that gives you an idea. I ended up trading there for a couple years. I learned a lot, and then I took my skills and went out to Chicago and traded for the First National Bank of Chicago, and finally made some money for a young kid. But I'll tell some more stories about this if you guys want. Click on the comments below. Let me know if I can embellish on any one of those things. I know it's hard in 10 minutes to give you a feel for what it was like, but some of the greatest moments of my life, and I wasn't making a lot of money, and I didn't care. I was just like in the middle of it, in the thick of it. This was old school, and there was no political correctness. You could take a lot of risk, and it was just tons of fun. So there you go. That's Ask Me Anything. Please click on the link, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Leave me your questions for next week. I'm out of here. Peace.